The great hall of the interstellar assembly buzzed with voices and footsteps, the sound echoing like a storm through the marble floors. Representatives of countless planets and civilizations had gathered to witness Earth's first presentation of its prototype ambassador, a human named Kale, who stood nervously at the edge of the room, his heart pounding. Every eye seemed to weigh him, every noble sneer carrying the weight of centuries of prejudice. Kale's uniform felt tight, unfamiliar, and stiff, as if it were mocking him too. The nobles, tall and radiant, with glowing skin or strange, delicate features, whispered among themselves, some pointing, some laughing quietly. "Earth sends that?" One murmured, his voice dripping with disdain. Kale could hear it, but he forced himself to stay still, to breathe, to focus. At the center of the hall, a grand platform shimmered with light, signaling the arrival of the alien princess. Her steps were graceful, almost floating, and her eyes glowed with colors no human had names for. The nobles turned their attention to her, but not with respect. Their gazes were sharp, cold, filled with the unspoken rule that she must be impressed by power, tradition, and status, not curiosity or kindness. Kale felt the weight of all those eyes on him, but when he looked at the princess, he saw something different, something fragile, human in a way that made him pause. Her expression was polite but guarded, and he could sense her fear of being judged, of being laughed at. Just like him, he felt a strange connection, a silent understanding, that perhaps, just perhaps, he was not alone. The nobles began their mockery openly then, their laughter filling the air, echoing like thunder. Kale's prototype model, designed to show human intelligence and potential, was mocked as clumsy and primitive. Some even snickered at the way he moved, as if Earth itself were a joke. Kale's cheeks burned with shame, but he clenched his fists and held his ground. Something inside him would not allow him to run, to hide, to give the nobles the satisfaction of his fear. The princess observed quietly, tilting her head as she studied Kale. She had expected strength, elegance, or dazzling skill, not awkwardness and quiet courage, and in that moment, something shifted in her gaze, curiosity replacing the cold indifference of the nobles. Kale noticed it, and his heart leaped with hope, a tiny spark of courage. He would not let this moment pass. He would not let the judgment of 1,000 nobles define him. Kale took a careful step forward, feeling the weight of history and expectation pressing down on him. Every whisper, every snicker, every doubtful glance tried to stop him. But he moved steadily, his eyes never leaving the princess. She watched him, her curiosity growing, sensing that this human, so unlike any other, might carry something important, something noble, something brave. The nobles continued to mock him, louder now, some daring to call out insults across the hall. "A human? Laughable," one shouted. "Pathetic." Another sneered. Kale did not flinch. He straightened his back, squared his shoulders, and let his eyes speak what his voice could not yet say, that he would not bow to ridicule, that he would not hide from judgment, that he would honor the presence of the princess with courage. And in that moment, a hush fell over the assembly, not because the nobles were impressed, but because even in their arrogance, they could sense something unusual, something daring, something that made them shift uncomfortably in their seats. The princess's eyes softened, and a faint smile touched her lips, almost imperceptible, but enough to reach Kale's heart. Kale stood there, the ridiculed prototype from Earth, mocked by every noble in the room, and yet, he felt a new kind of power growing inside him. The power of quiet courage, of human spirit, of the bravery to act when everyone else hesitated. The spark of what Earth could become, if humans believed in themselves, had just begun to shine. And so, the first step of a journey that no noble could have predicted had begun. Kale's eyes met the princess's, and the air between them held a promise, a question, and a hope. One human, one alien princess, and the beginning of a story that would change how the universe saw Earth forever. The alien princess moved gracefully through the assembly hall, her glowing aura lighting the polished floors. Every noble turned to watch her, some with curiosity, most with silent judgment. Their eyes were sharp, their whispers sharper, like knives hidden beneath silk. She approached the center platform, expecting at least a polite greeting, a respectful nod, or a word of welcome. But instead, the room fell silent, a tense and heavy silence, then erupted into quiet murmurs of disdain. One by one, the nobles spoke, their voices polite but cold, dismissive. "We have no need of alliances with Earth," said one with a hint of mockery. "Their creations are weak, their minds untested. Why should we honor them?" Another added, his eyes scanning Kale with thinly veiled contempt. The princess's heart sank a little, the weight of rejection pressing on her shoulders. She had traveled far, seeking allies and respect. Yet all she found was arrogance and scorn. Kale watched from the edge of the hall, his hands clenched, his jaw tight. He felt the sting of injustice not only for himself, but for the princess, for all the beings who had been underestimated, dismissed, or laughed at. Yet he knew this was not the time to act recklessly. Every move would be watched, judged, and potentially used against them. His mind raced, thinking of a way to protect her honor and show the truth of Earth's courage. Some nobles whispered cruel jokes, comparing her to a child, or questioning her wisdom. The princess kept her head high, but the faint tremor in her hands betrayed her fear. She had faced rejection before, but never so openly, never so publicly. And yet, even in the midst of humiliation, she noticed Kale standing quietly, unshaken. His presence, though small and unassuming, radiated something she had not expected: strength, respect, and a quiet defiance. The noble's rejection grew bolder, their words harsher. "You do not belong here," one sneered. "Return to your world before you embarrass yourself further." Another shouted. Some even laughed outright, turning the princess's dignity into a spectacle. She felt the walls of her confidence crumble. But Kale's calm courage gave her a strange hope. Perhaps one being in this vast hall saw her as more than a prize, more than a curiosity. Kale took a slow step forward, feeling the weight of every gaze. The noble's laughter rose like a tide against him. Yet he moved steadily, his eyes never leaving the princess. He did not speak yet, but his presence said more than words ever could. That Earth had courage, that humans could honor truth over fear, that respect was not earned by wealth or power alone. The princess's eyes widened slightly as she realized his intention. There was no flattery, no desire for recognition, only honesty and bravery. She had not expected a human to act with such dignity, to rise above mockery when every other noble had bowed to arrogance. Her heart stirred, a quiet warmth growing inside, a seed of trust beginning to bloom. Whispers of disbelief traveled through the hall. The nobles exchanged nervous glances, sensing that something unusual was happening. A human was breaking the rules, defying tradition, and no one could predict the consequences. The princess's gaze softened, and she took a small, almost imperceptible step toward Kale. A question hung in the air between them. Would he continue to defy them all, or would fear take him down like the others? Kale knew the answer without thinking. He would not bow to ridicule, he would not retreat, he would stand for what was right, for what was just, and for the alien princess who deserved respect. The stage was set, the players ready, and the tension in the assembly hall had never been higher. And in that silent, electric moment, the first spark of rebellion against arrogance and mockery was lit. The princess and the human, two beings from different worlds, had found a connection in the midst of rejection, a connection that would grow stronger with each trial, each danger, each challenge that lay ahead. The nobles' laughter filled the hall again, sharper and louder than before. Their sneers were meant to crush courage, to remind everyone that tradition and power ruled above all. Yet Kale did not flinch. He took a deep breath, steadying his heart, and stepped closer to the alien princess. His eyes met hers, calm and unwavering, speaking a language no noble could understand, a language of respect, honor, and courage. The princess tilted her head, surprised, her lips parted slightly, uncertain of what he would do next. All the nobles watched, their whispers growing louder, expecting him to fail, to falter, to bow in shame. But Kale did none of those things. Instead, he knelt before her, the hall falling silent as his gesture echoed through the assembly, not out of submission, but out of honor, an act that demanded attention and challenged arrogance. Gasps escaped from some nobles, their eyes wide with disbelief. How dare a human defy centuries of hierarchy? How dare he kneel before the princess without fear, without hesitation? They began to murmur warnings, some calling it a scandal, others daring him to rise before they demanded it. But Kale remained still, his focus on the princess, his courage radiating in a way that could not be ignored. The princess's eyes widened, a small spark of admiration lighting her expression. She had expected humans to be weak, unremarkable, bound by fear and ridicule. Yet here was one who stood alone against the weight of the entire assembly, one who honored her without seeking praise or reward. Her heart stirred with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Could this human truly be different, truly see her worth when no noble had? One particularly arrogant noble stepped forward, voice sharp and mocking. A human dares to kneel before royalty? Pathetic, insolent, foolish. The words were meant to humiliate, to crush both Kale and the princess under centuries of tradition. Yet Kale lifted his gaze calmly, meeting the noble's eyes with steady defiance. I kneel not to be praised, nor to seek favor. I kneel out of respect, and for courage that is in the heart, not in crowns or wealth, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the hall, every word a spark of fire against centuries of arrogance. The nobles murmured again, some shocked, some angry, some realized that this human's bravery was not empty, but real, a strength they had underestimated. The princess, too, felt a strange warmth, a quiet trust forming in her chest. She had been rejected and belittled, But this human saw her as more than her title, more than her crown, more than the judgments of the nobles who feared anything new. Kale rose slowly, keeping his focus on her. The nobles' laughter had faded, replaced by whispers of tension and curiosity. Some were impressed, some angry, all unsettled. The princess smiled slightly, the first genuine smile in the assembly hall that day. It was small, yet powerful, a reward for courage that few could understand. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The nobles were unsure, the princess curious, and Kale ready. This moment would mark the first step in a story that no one in the assembly could predict. A story where courage, honor, and human ingenuity would challenge arrogance and prejudice, where one human's act of defiance could change the way an entire universe saw Earth. And as Kale stood before the princess, the air between them charged with unspoken promise. The first challenge had been met, but the greater trials had only just begun. The sparks of rebellion against mockery, and the first steps of a bond between worlds, were only growing stronger. The hall had grown quiet, but the silence was heavy, filled with the tension of nobles whispering among themselves, plotting, scheming. Kale stood tall, his eyes fixed on the alien princess, aware that their defiance had stirred more than curiosity. It had stirred fear. The nobles who had once mocked him now looked at him with suspicion, some anger, and some with a dangerous gleam in their eyes. Whispers grew into murmurs, and murmurs into plans. Small groups huddled in corners, plotting how to humiliate the human and reclaim their pride. One noble hissed, "This insolent human dares to challenge centuries of tradition. He must be shown his place." Another added, "If he dares act again, we will make him regret it before the princess." Their schemes were silent but deadly, a storm of arrogance brewing beneath polite smiles. The princess sensed the danger too. She could feel the nobles' hostility like a cold wind brushing against her skin. Some glanced at her with hidden malice, others with quiet envy. But her gaze kept returning to Kale, to the human who had dared kneel before her without fear. His courage was a shield, a strange force she did not fully understand, yet trusted. Kale moved cautiously, knowing the nobles could strike at any moment. He could feel the walls closing in, every glance carrying a hidden threat. Yet he did not show fear, for he knew fear would give them power over him and the princess. Instead, he focused on strategy, on anticipating what the nobles might do, on protecting the princess while proving that Earth's humans were not weak. Suddenly, a noble stepped forward, smirking. "Let us test the human," he said, raising a device that sent a sharp beam of energy across the hall, a trap designed to embarrass, or worse, to harm. The crowd gasped, expecting Kale to falter, expecting him to stumble like any weak prototype. Yet Kale's mind worked quickly, instincts honed from years of training and survival. He dodged, rolled, and used the device's reflection to redirect the beam harmlessly into the floor. The nobles froze, shocked at his skill, some angry, some impressed. Kale's actions were clever, precise, and unexpected. He had not only protected himself but avoided harming anyone else, showing intelligence and restraint. The princess's eyes widened in admiration, her trust in him deepening. She realized that this human's courage was not blind, it was guided by wisdom and compassion. The nobles muttered among themselves, uneasy, realizing that Kale's courage was more than bravery. It was a force that could not be easily defeated. Some tried to approach him with polite words hiding threats. Others sought subtle ways to trap him. But Kale stayed alert, always one step ahead. His presence alone disrupted their plans, his mind a puzzle they could not solve. The princess stepped closer, sensing the danger surrounding them both. She whispered to Kale, "They do not understand you, or us." Her voice was soft, yet carried strength. He nodded, silently acknowledging her words, knowing that their alliance was just beginning. Their bond, built on respect and courage, was stronger than any threat, stronger than mockery. And so, the hall remained tense, the nobles plotting, the princess observing, and Kale standing firm. The stage had shifted. The human who had once been ridiculed now commanded attention, not through arrogance, but through intelligence, courage, and honor. The first real challenge had begun, and every step forward would be a test of heart, mind, and spirit. The sparks of defiance and bravery were growing into a flame, one that would soon illuminate the truth about Earth, humans, and the value of courage in a universe that had long underestimated them. The tension in the assembly hall was unbearable, every noble holding their breath, waiting to see what the human would do next. Kale stood tall, his eyes fixed on the alien princess, his mind calm but sharp. Every glance from the nobles was a challenge, every whisper a trap, yet he remained steady, for he knew that courage was not only in facing danger, but in standing firm for what was right. A group of nobles attempted to corner him, hoping to humiliate him and the princess. Their devices flashed, and their words cut like knives. "This human is foolish," one hissed. "He will bring shame to Earth." Another sneered, but Kale was ready. He moved with precision, dodging traps, redirecting attacks, and using clever tricks that no noble had expected. His actions were not reckless, but thoughtful, showing both intelligence and courage. The princess watched in as Kale protected not only himself but also her. Every move he made spoke of honor and respect, qualities the nobles had long forgotten. She felt her trust in him solidify, and with it, a bond stronger than any title or crown. Some nobles began to murmur, unable to hide their surprise. "The human, he is not what we expected," one whispered. "Perhaps Earth holds more than we know," another added. Kale finally faced the main noble who had been the loudest in mocking him. The noble raised a staff, ready to humiliate him once and for all. But Kale acted quickly, not with anger, but with skill, disarming the noble without causing harm. His actions were precise and controlled, showing that courage was guided by wisdom, not pride. The hall fell silent, the tension broken by Kale's calm and clever triumph. The alien princess stepped forward, her glowing aura filling the room. She looked at Kale and smiled openly for the first time, a smile of admiration, respect, and genuine trust. "You have honor, courage, and wisdom," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Earth has sent more than a prototype, they have sent a human who is true." The nobles shifted uncomfortably, some bowed their heads in grudging respect, others stared, unwilling to admit defeat. Kale nodded humbly, not seeking praise, but understanding the importance of his actions. He had stood for what was right, protected the princess, and shown that humans were capable of courage and intelligence that even the greatest nobles could not ignore. The princess extended her hand, and Kale took it with quiet confidence. Their alliance sealed, not by fear or power, but by trust, respect, and bravery. The assembly hall seemed to change that day. The nobles who had mocked and sneered could no longer ignore the truth. The human from Earth had defied them all, not with arrogance, but with courage and honor. The princess's smile shone brightly, a light of hope and possibility in a universe that had underestimated humans for too long. Kale looked around the hall one last time, sensing the shift. The laughter and mockery had faded, replaced by curiosity, some admiration, and the beginning of respect. He had proven that courage and intelligence were stronger than titles, tradition, and prejudice, that Earth's humans could rise above ridicule and show the universe their true strength. And so, the ridiculed prototype became a symbol, not only for the princess, but for all who doubted humanity, a human who dared to kneel, to honor, and to act with courage, a human who changed the hearts and minds of nobles and inspired hope for the galaxy. The story of Kale and the alien princess had only begun, but the first chapter was written in bravery, trust, and respect.